The wind on the Ukrainian front has shifted toward a brutal new reality as Kiev seizes the initiative in a move of total operational erasure. While the world's attention was fixed on Zaporizhia, a strategic inflection point was triggered. The focus is now Mariupol. This city is the beating heart of the most vital arteries keeping the Russian war machine alive. We are witnessing the heroes of the 2022 Azovstal resistance return to these sacred lands to settle unfinished business. As the legendary Azov Brigade returns to the sacred lands they once lost, what specific strategic breakthrough allowed them to bypass the static trench warfare of the South and suddenly reappear at the beating heart of Russia's most vital logistics hub? Breaking fortified lines usually requires massive armor and staggering casualties. For months, static southern defenses created a profound doctrine crisis for the occupation. Direct assaults on these positions are typically tactical suicide. However, the Azov Brigade recognized a strategic inflection point. They leveraged an asymmetric advantage by targeting the occupation's functional foundation. The breakthrough is a radical shift in focus to collapse the critical connection corridor between the southern front and Crimea, providing vital tactical support to 90,000 to 130,000 soldiers. On May 8, 2026, the announcement of their return through United 24 media fundamentally shook the dynamics of the war. But this was not a standard infantry assault. If the return to Mariupol was not a standard infantry assault involving tank convoys or heavy armor, what deadly and stealthy 21st century warfare doctrine is being unleashed to bypass Russia's most fortified defensive lines? The traditional reliance on massive armor and human waves has hit a dead end against modern fortifications. This doctrine crisis forces a move toward operational erasure, where the battlefield is no longer a horizontal line but a vertical hunt. We are seeing a strategic inflection point where visibility equals destruction. The era of the safe rear has been systematically dismantled by a new form of asymmetric advantage. These are not merely weapons. They are a terrifying operational network designed to paralyze the enemy's heart. The answer lies in the deployment of an artificial intelligence-equipped kamikaze drone fleet. Specifically, the United States-made Swiftbeat-manufactured Hornet drones developed by former Google CEO Eric Schmidt's company, Perennial Autonomy. These systems penetrate exactly 160 kilometers deep into the line of contact, giving the enemy no room to breathe. This distance creates a massive strategic circle that places all Russian logistics hubs, ammunition depots, and assembly areas within Ukraine's absolute firing range. These are monsters equipped with artificial intelligence. As these artificial intelligence-equipped monsters penetrate 160 kilometers behind the front lines, what terrifying specific capability allowed them to turn the safe Russian logistics hubs into a burning graveyard without a single human finger on the trigger? Autonomous warfare without human intervention represents the ultimate strategic inflection point. By removing human hesitation, Azov achieves operational erasure where machine efficiency is absolute. This asymmetric advantage causes a profound doctrine crisis for manual armies. The secret is the fusion of artificial intelligence and Starlink connectivity. This pairing renders these drones immune to electronic warfare and signal jammers. It allows the system to process data in real time, ensuring the killing blow is delivered with mathematical certainty. These systems utilize 5-kilogram warheads and AI target recognition to identify military assets in seconds without any human input. With a range of 160 kilometers, they are now scouring every inch of Mariupol, ensuring no Russian fuel tanker or personnel carrier is safe on any road. Now that the Azov Brigade has established total digital dominance over the city's roads, what is the next-generation aerial doctrine they have pioneered that allows these drones to act not just as missiles, but as invisible hunters that can choose the exact second of their enemy's demise? The transition from traditional bombardment to persistent aerial surveillance represents the implementation of psychological operational erasure. When an adversary understands that the sky is saturated with sensors but cannot detect the specific threat until the moment of impact, military discipline begins to evaporate. This state of constant invisible monitoring creates a pervasive doctrine crisis where every bridge crossing or road junction becomes a potential graveyard. The suspense of the unknown is often more lethal than the explosion itself, forcing the occupation to weigh the cost of every single logistics movement. This tactical mastery turns the entire theater into an inescapable kill zone where the hunter chooses the exact second of the kill. The name of this next-generation tactic utilized by the Azov Brigade in the sky is loiter and strike. These drones operate as silent and invisible hunters, hovering 4 hours above their targets with cold, mechanical patience. They calculate the critical moment when Russian convoys are at their most vulnerable, waiting for them to reduce speed, cross a bridge, or navigate a crowded intersection. When that moment of weakness arrives, they mercilessly dive from the sky. This asymmetric advantage renders multi-million-dollar air defense systems like Pantsir or Tur utterly helpless, as they cannot even see these artificial intelligence-supported ghosts due to their low radar signatures. The situation on the ground has deteriorated to a strategic inflection point where Russian drivers frequently abandon their vehicles and flee for their lives the moment they hear an approaching threat. These frontline reports reveal a state of absolute horror and panic among the occupation forces, knowing their chances of survival are mathematically low. The gravity of this situation is further highlighted by data from the Occupation Research Center, which detected 2 massive new military bases built in March and April of 2025. As Russian soldiers abandoned their vehicles in terror of these invisible ghosts, what massive permanent military fortresses did the occupation forces build in secret during 2025, and how did Azov manage to penetrate their invisible signal shields before the first brick was even dry? The doctrine of hardening targets is a dangerous fallacy. This creates a strategic inflection point where material safety is a total illusion. Military planners often mistake physical thickness for operational invincibility. This fundamental error triggers a terminal doctrine crisis when facing precision intelligence and asymmetric advantages. The psychological collapse following the breach of a fortress is absolute. It signals that no physical barrier can provide a sanctuary in the modern theater. In Mariupol, this failure manifested into permanent bases built in March and April of 2025. One served as a main logistics hub, the other a colossal assembly area for armored equipment. These concrete fortresses, protected by observation towers and electronic warfare, suffered total operational erasure. Azov's technology bypassed the invisible signal shields, turning these massive investments into ruins. If these permanent concrete fortresses and invisible signal shields proved useless in Mariupol, what incredible logistics nightmare did Azov orchestrate in the supposedly unreachable safe zone of Donetsk just weeks before their arrival on the coast? The perceived invincibility of a rear-echelon logistics hub creates a dangerous complacency in military high command. When a supposedly unreachable safe zone is compromised, it triggers a total doctrine crisis that resonates through the entire operational framework. This represents the absolute operational erasure of the enemy's psychological sanctuary. Donetsk was long treated by the occupation as an eternally secure logistics paradise. To strike here was to challenge the fundamental geography of the conflict. This strategic inflection point forced a recalibration of the entire rearguard defense strategy. In April 2026, just weeks before arriving at the coast, Azov orchestrated a calculated nightmare by descending upon the critical junctions of the Donetsk Ring Road. This campaign was woven stitch by stitch with immense patience and brilliance. By targeting specific nodes like Zers and Reka and Strabisha, the brigade leveraged a massive asymmetric advantage. Instead of classic singular strikes, they unleashed coordinated swarm tactics. Day and night, FPV and Hornet drones patrolled the narrowest bridge crossings, creating a lethal bottleneck for the convoys of the 1st Donetsk Army Corps. Field reports confirm Russian commanders were literally left without ammunition at the front line as fuel and ammunition trucks were liquidated. The sounds of explosions lasted for days, and the perception of a safe rear was shattered to pieces, as the logistics paradise of Donetsk collapses under the weight of coordinated drone swarms. What secret urban warfare operation did Azov's elite international battalion launch in the basements of Zalokolatas to prove they are just as deadly in hand-to-hand combat as they are in the sky? Urban warfare is the most grueling test of a soldier's resolve, where every basement becomes a lethal trap. In the village of Zalokolatas, the occupation forces sought to neutralize Ukraine's asymmetric advantage by burying themselves deep underground, hoping to turn the settlement into a fortress of attrition. This created a profound doctrine crisis for conventional units, as heavy artillery cannot easily penetrate reinforced civilian structures without risking the entire operational objective. The hidden danger lay in the complexity of the terrain, where a single missed room could result in a catastrophic ambush for an advancing force. This strategic inflection point demanded a level of tactical brilliance that few units in the modern era possess. It was no longer about brute force, but the systematic and clinical application of force to achieve operational erasure in the most confined spaces imaginable. The answer was a 21-day masterclass in specialized clearing operations conducted in February 2026. Instead of a clumsy infantry assault, the Azov International Battalion established a ring of steel, using FPV drones to map every square centimeter of the village from the air before a single soldier stepped foot. Inside, this aerial reconnaissance revealed the enemy's exact hiding spots, allowing elite clearing teams to advance building by building and room by room using night vision and close-quarters weapons. In a stunning display of professional dominance, exactly 18 Russian soldiers were forced to lay down their arms and were taken prisoner alive within a single 24-hour period. This was not just a victory of arms, but a triumph of psychological warfare that transformed the brigade into a deadly war machine months before. They reached the borders of Mariupol. These ground operations work in perfect harmony with the general offensive, ensuring that tactical successes on the ground accelerate the strategic collapse of the southern front. As the interrogation of these 18 prisoners reveals the true vulnerability of the Russian rear, what grand strategic equation is now being triggered on the satellite maps that could trap the entire Russian army in a massive, inescapable pincher movement across the southern front? The interrogation of 18 prisoners was more than a tactical success. It exposed the internal decay of the occupation's rear command. This intelligence allows for a grand strategic equation designed to induce total operational erasure across the southern theater. The hidden danger for the occupation is the widening information gap between starving frontline units and their isolated commanders. We are witnessing a strategic inflection point where survival becomes mathematically impossible. The tension across the southern front has reached a breaking point as the trap is finally sprung. The answer is a massive satellite-verified pincer movement where Ukraine's most elite units are closing the net. The 118th and 47th Mechanized Brigades are pushing relentlessly by land while air assault brigades paralyze the rear lines. This synergy ensures that as Azov severs the logistics jugular in the background, the frontline forces suffer a total doctrine crisis. An army without fuel, ammunition, or food cannot fight. It simply collapses as the grand strategic equation traps the Russian army in a logistics-starved pincer. What bitter confession did Russia's most famous military analysts just release regarding the absolute brink of collapse of the land bridge to Crimea? The disintegration of a primary logistics corridor is not merely a tactical setback. It is a terminal doctrine crisis that signals the end of operational viability. For years, the land bridge was heralded as a supposedly unbreakable asphalt lifeline stretching toward the horizon. Admitting its vulnerability confesses that the entire southern occupation is built on a foundation of sand. Analysts now face a strategic inflection point where the cost of defense outweighs the benefit of holding territory. This is an empire unmasking its frailty before a global audience. The tension is no longer about if the bridge fails, but how much time remains before the final severing. The answer lies in reports from the analyst Jiv and the blog Ribber. They admit the corridor via Berdyansk and Henichesk is under absolute fire control. Consequently, Crimea is becoming a massive isolated logistics island as commercial passages are halted and civilians are banned from these routes. Even Russia's $12 billion investment into a new railway line through Volnovakha is useless. Partisans sabotage the infrastructure while Azov's drones turn multi-billion-dollar investments into ashes every night. This is the power of an asymmetric advantage that forces a choice between total retreat or total destruction, with the $12 billion railway in ruins and Crimea successfully isolated as a logistics island. What unimaginable pressure and brainwashing curriculums is Russia now unleashing on the civilians of Mariupol as a final, desperate attempt to colonize the city before the Azov Brigade completes its cleansing zone? The colonization of a captured city is the final stage of operational erasure, where the occupier attempts to delete the national identity of the population. This process is not merely administrative. It is a brutal psychological campaign designed to create a human shield against liberation. The pressure applied to the residents of Mariupol is unimaginable, as the Kremlin recognizes its physical grip on the region is failing. By targeting the youth through forced curriculums and the elderly through restricted access to basics, they seek to anchor their presence in a sea of hostility. This hidden struggle is the silent counterpart to the kinetic war being waged in the sky. It is a desperate race against time to solidify a demographic victory before the military defeat becomes irreversible? The answer lies in the forced issuance of Russian passports, the systematic closure of Ukrainian schools, and the introduction of aggressive brainwashing curriculums. These efforts are led by the 58th Guards Combined Arms Army and the 810th Naval Infantry Brigade, the same actors responsible for the 2022 massacres. Even as the 9th Guards Motorized Rifle Brigade integrates former militias to hold the city, their efforts are melting away. Azov's asymmetric advantage has turned the city from a logistics hub into a lethal drone shooting range, effectively severing the Russian army's jugular vein. This strategic inflection point allows 90,000 to 130,000 Ukrainian soldiers to advance harder than ever. We have reached a breaking point where muscle power and tank numbers are rendered obsolete by the systematic destruction of logistics 160 kilometers behind the lines, creating a total doctrine crisis for the occupier. This is the most flawless military march toward ultimate victory, ripping the gates of Crimea off their hinges. That will of steel that defied death in those dark airless tunnels 4 years ago is ruling the sky with advanced technology today. This evolution proves that modern war is won by systematic logistical suffocation, tearing up resistance like a piece of paper. Do you think the Russian army can afford to sacrifice Crimea as a last resort to repair these completely collapsed logistics networks, or will this absolute dominance of Azov in the sky be that unstoppable deadly blow that will bring the war to an end much sooner than expected?